You're only as good as the watch on your wrist. This is another famous quote by my grandfather. When first hearing this quote, it sounds very superficial and judgmental, which on the surface it is. But this is not what my grandfather meant by it. What he means is a watch is an extension of who you are, expressing it to the world. Growing up, I was fascinated by watches, something I loved just from a young age, just the look of it. But as I've grown up, I learned to appreciate the heritage and the mechanics of it. For me and many others, watches are more than just a material possession. Every watch I own represents a time and memory in my life that I'll always be reminded of every time I look down at my wrist. So for you to all understand how these watches signify landmarks in my life, I'll describe to you the origin of each watch, the history of each watch, and why I was given them. So the first watch I ever owned was this Nixon right here. So when we were 13, me and my buddies were degenerate gamblers. We played poker at my friend's house every Friday night. That was the ritual. And so this was the first watch I ever won off my best friend Hudson. So Nixon is a brand created by two best friends originally in Encinitas, California in the early 90s. And ironically, stole this watch off one of my best friends. But big hand poker, got the straight on the flop, and yeah, so that's the first watch I ever owned. And every time I look at it, it just reminds me of the greatest hand of poker I've ever played to this date, and the most I've ever won. Secondly, I would like to talk about the first watch I was ever given, which is my grandfather's Longines from 1956, which is this watch right here. So Longines is a company, it's a Swiss watch company founded in the early 1800s. They're known for making great quality, mid-range price watches. So in the summer of 1956, my grandfather landed a major contract that skyrocketed his company to later future success. So in order to celebrate, he wanted to treat himself and bought himself his first watch he'd ever owned. This was a big deal for him. My grandfather grew up incredibly poor in the streets of New York, and to be able to afford his first stone gold watch was a real milestone achievement. I received this watch right before one of my first days of high school. He sat me down, gave me this big long speech, and the moral of the story was I was a man now, and gave me the watch right off his wrist. So every time I see that, I know the struggles and everything my grandfather had to do to get me that, and yeah, it reminds me to this day. And lastly, I'll be talking about the second watch I was ever gifted. So for the last year, me and my two partners have been trying to sell our show and pitching it to networks and advertisers. And I remember getting our first big meeting on the books, which was with the CEO of the Deutsch Agency. And I was incredibly nervous, never had a meeting before, was losing my mind, and I didn't really know how to prepare. So my dad told me to get in his car and didn't tell me where we were going. We ended up at the Panerai store, and he bought me the last watch right there. And so my dad told me his dad did the same thing for him when he had his first interview. Bought him a watch, and it just gave him the confidence he needed to really just succeed in the meeting. And my dad ended up landing the job. Unfortunately, nothing really came of our meeting, but welcome to SSC, here I am. It gave me the confidence I needed to really just talk to another man to man, just have a conversation instead of freaking out and being all nervous. So yeah, that watch, I wear it every day, and it's every time I look down at it, it kind of gives me a little confidence booster. And so yeah, in conclusion, I want to leave you with, you're only as good as the watch on your wrist. A watch doesn't have to be expensive to be a good watch. A watch just has to have a meaning behind it that's important to you. So I hope through me explaining the origin, history, and why I was given these watches, you see how they represent landmarks in my life.